everyone, welcome to Culture on I-24 News. I'm Udit Grober. Thank you so much for joining me. Today on our program, we'll talk to artist Ido Shemi about his latest project. Ivry Gitlis, a violin legend at the Keshet Eilon workshop. And we'll hear about the hit series of the Arab world. Let's begin with some cultural headlines. The American series Dig, which originally started production in Jerusalem but had to leave because of the recent violence in the region, found a new home in Croatia. The series, a mystery thriller about a death investigation that uncovers a 1,000-year conspiracy, was created by Israeli producer Gideon Raff and American Tim Kring. It is set entirely in Jerusalem, but the fighting between Israel and Gaza forced production out of Israel and away from its original setting. Production moved temporarily to Albuquerque in the U.S. while they searched for a new location that can stand in for Jerusalem. I'm sure the Croatian landscape can't fully replace the sights of the Holy City, but I guess it'll have to do. Now, will Weird Al Yankovic, the superstar of musical parodies, perform during the halftime show of the next Super Bowl? An online petition started by a fan of Weird Al calls on the NFL to have the comedic musician headline at the big game next February. So far, nearly 45,000 people signed the petition, an impressive number, explained perhaps by the fact that the artist's recent album, Mandatory Fun, debuted straight to #1. Even though Weird Al has been in the business for 40 years and sold more than 12 million albums, this is the first time an album of his accomplishes such an achievement. Weird Al seems to be on a roll these days. His 1989 cult film, UHF, will be remastered and reissued on Blu-ray this coming November, so keep it in mind for your Christmas shopping. A new crowdsourcing campaign attempts to raise funds for the publication of a new ambitious book, 500 pages of autobiographical comics, doodles, texts, and even holograms, the results of 15 years of work by Ido Shemi, who gladly is right here in the studio. Hello, Ido. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about this really unique book.
Well, I've been working on this book for about 15 years. It's all made by hand. I paint and illustrate everything. But it's also a documentary or autobiography of my life about 3 months before I was born in 1963.
It starts 3 months before you were born?
Before I was born.
Okay.
But you have to read the book because it explains the vision I had 3 months before I was born. Until the day the book will be published.
I see.
That's the
so it
done.
could actually just be the first of a series of books. First, let's have that one.
Yeah, let's achieve this one. It's still got some time.
How'd you start it?
I've been working. I tried to be an artist for about 30 years. It wasn't easy in Israel because there was no system to get into with the new style. It took me a long time. In the meanwhile, I opened a club that became really successful. His name was the Dinamo Dvash Electronic Club.
Very known club in Israel.
It was really, really successful, and I was doing all the graphic designs and all the propaganda street work.
Right.
And I developed my language. And about 14 years ago, I had enlightenment that I have to do this book. And I started working on it and left the club. And about 6 months later, I had a very good exhibition at the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. Since that, I'm a full-time artist.
Working on it.
Yeah.
And now I read somewhere that you had to, initially you had more than 1,000 pages that you cut down to 500.
I had about 1,500 because every day there's a new page. But I had to eliminate half of it because it was crazy enough to do this.
I can't imagine doing the 1,500 pages. And I even more can imagine cutting it down to 500.
Very, very, very sad. It's a bad situation. I can offer somebody that try to make a book like this, not to go so much.
They're already to aim low from the get-go.
Yeah.
Now you have a lot of people working with you on this project. Some very talented writers like Uri Misgav, Udi Sharabani, Ty Mountner. How do you let someone else write for your autobiography?
Okay, first of all, they're all friends. I know them from way back. And they know me, and I love their work. I've been follow their articles in which newspaper they work. And I offer them a specific time during all these years to try to express themselves, because it's like 50 years, you know, in a different time zones.
I see.
And they picked the time, and they wrote about their experience in this time. During this period.
I see. Now, you've been a part of what one might call the Israeli underground for many years. You mentioned the Dinamo Dvash.
Way before, in the 80s even.
And goes back even more.
Yeah.
What happened during all these years? What happened to the underground culture?
First, it was really small. There was about 50 people in the 80s that followed and listened to different music, not especially go to the mythological places like the Penguin Club, but there was other clubs. And it was very hard to get information because there was no internet, there was no promoting this kind of culture, but still, this crowd grew and grew and grew, and today I think it's not the underground anymore, it's the mainstream. There's like the Tether are doing great things, and a lot of organizations, a lot of collaborations, and hopefully the culture is changing, you know, people can consume it, and it's not so hard to find.
Yeah,
so.
No question. Very quickly about yourself, you're not a typical artist. You never studied art. How did you find your way to the art world?
It took a lot of years, but I always constantly believed that that's what I'm supposed to do. And even the times were really hard, I never quit. And I go on and go on.
Well, from seeing your works, it seems like you found your place after all. Ido Shemi, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
All right, let's move now to Israel's northern border in Kibbutz Eilon, where every year for 2 weeks a very special course takes place. Young violinists from around the world arrive to learn from the great violin masters such as Ivry Gitlis, a living legend of the violin. David Gombin and Anthony Lem went and met him.
Welcome to Kibbutz Eilon, next to the Lebanese border. In this small hilltop village, each year young violinists from around the world gather for a unique summer program, Keshet Eilon. 21-year-old Elvira came here from the Netherlands.
What I really like about this is that you all stay together and you eat together, and there are so many things you can do, so many activities. So you really get to know the other people, and you get to know a lot of musicians.
Yitzhak Rashovsky, Chaim Taub, and Stefan Picard. These violin masters came together to instruct the young generation of musicians. Ivry Gitlis is the veteran among them. Born in 1922, this exceptional musician grew up in Haifa, where he remembers a childhood of coexistence.
When I grew up, we played together with the Palestinian children. We had no language barriers because the language was the language of children, from another era too.
On the advice of Bronislav Huberman, the founder of the Palestine Orchestra, he moved with his mother to study in Paris.
Today people are looking for sponsors. They look for people to give you scholarships. We had no scholarships. One day my mother came, she said she had found places in the 4th class, which no longer exists, of course, on a ship called the Sphinx.
Gitlis arrived in Paris of the 30s.
Paris sera toujours Paris.
In 1935, he received the first prize of the Paris Conservatory, and his career was on its way. A career that will take him across 4 continents. He is considered the last great living legendary violinist of the 20th century. In 1963, he was the first Israeli violinist to tour the USSR.
My first show was at a concert with the Leningrad Philharmonic Orchestra, a magnificent orchestra. In the first recital, the room was almost full. In the second, there were 500 or 600 people who couldn't get in, and people were fighting in the streets to get in.
During the nearly 80 years of his astounding career, he met musicians from very different backgrounds.
Oui, j'ai rencontré une fois Brian Jones.
Yes, I met Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones once. He was an absolutely adorable boy. He called me one day from London asking me to take part in a film of the Rolling Stones. I went there and I improvised with them. Unfortunately, at the same time, Yoko Ono, John Lennon's wife, John Lennon was also there. She came there and she started screaming. I almost wanted to...
In addition to being a musician, Ivry Gitlis is also a writer, teacher, and even an actor. For Truffaut, he hypnotized Isabella Gianni in the story of Adele H.
He contacted me. He wanted me for the part. I didn't say no. You know, I think if I had any authority in education in general, I would make sure everyone acts at least once in a while, in theater or in cinema, because it's a way to live life in full.
At the age of 92, Ivry Gitlis devotes his time to passing on his experience. At Keshet Eilon, he advises the young musicians on how to externalize their emotions.
If you have emotions and you have the instruments with which to express them, well, you're lucky in a sense because it helps you with your emotions. It's cheaper than going to a psychiatrist.
He tries to bring out that what actually is already in me. And I don't really show it because I have so many problems in my head or in my technical problems that I can't really express how I could do it. And he tries to bring it out.
After 2 weeks of workshops and meetings, the students of Keshet Eilon go back home, full of memories, experiences, and good humor of one of the greatest violinists of our time.
And joining me now in the studio is I-24 News correspondent Ranin Boulos with some cultural stories from the Arab world. Ranin, welcome.
Hi, hello.
Happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here, thank you.
Now, what are we going to talk about today?
Okay, so today we're going to talk about a TV show, a Syrian TV show called Bab Al-Har, which means in Arabic it means the neighborhood's gate.
Okay.
Bab Al-Har, the neighborhood's gate.
It's a Syrian show, but it's broadcasted all over the Arab world.
All over the world. The Arab world went crazy when this show started. The ratings were crazy high, and everyone, really, all the Arabs, not all the Arabs, most of the Arabs in the world were, when the time came for Bab Al-Har, they were all sitting and watching the show.
Now,
even me.
The show airs during a specific time of year, during Ramadan,
exactly.
Right? And it's a good time for a TV. It's a good idea because the families are all together and they sit down and have their
They eat and they watch Bab Al-Har, and this is how this is how people did it. I mean, Bab Al-Har. It's only in Ramadan, the month in Ramadan, and people, and it's in the evening, so it's the time when they break the fast, they sit and eat and watch Bab Al-Har. But Bab Al-Har is not a normal TV show. It comes to talk about the history of Syria under the French, and it talks about this specific neighborhood, Bab Al-Har. Bab is door, Hara is neighborhood, so
the entrance to the neighborhood.
Yes, this neighborhood was the strong neighborhood at that time. The neighborhood
We're talking about the early 20th century.
Yes, the early 20th century. This neighborhood was the one that really had the men that fought the French.
I see.
And
so there's a political undertone, if you will, a political saying that is coming through.
Yes, it's a very political show. It comes to tell the story of all what happened with when the French were in Syria, and how people were fighting to get their independence, and especially this neighborhood.
Right.
Now
Now in Syria, politics these days, I mean, it's not.
It's a bit problematic.
How do you even shoot a series. I know you can shoot in Syria, but shoot a series in Syria these days.
Yeah, it's true. In the beginning, when they started, it wasn't, the situation in Syria was relatively calm.
Right.
I guess it was it was cooking, the
right.
whole situation. And so in the beginning, they filmed it in Syria, in Damascus. And in 2006, they filmed it in Dubai and in Beirut because of the political situation in Syria.
later, not 2006, but for the sixth.
Sorry, yes, in the sixth
season,
yeah,
right.
in season number 6.
2012, maybe.
Yeah. Wow, you're.
Yeah.
I can see it. So what's left is to teach you Arabic.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Easy.
Great.
So you watch it. What's so special about it? Why is it such a big success?
It's a very big success because it takes you back into the traditional time. It's very authentic, and but the thing that there's a lot of criticism on Bab Al-Har because they show there the women in a very very weak.
Maybe by the next season they'll get their act together.
I hope.
Nini, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you for joining us as well. Please join us again tomorrow for our weekend edition. Bye-bye.